Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at the JessEm Baltic Birch Workstation. This workstation is compatible with JessEm's Pocket Mill Pro or this Doweling jig. And today we're going to just go over what comes in the box, how to set this up, and some of the features that you get with this workstation. Now the idea behind this workstation for me is to make this jig more useful, more versatile. As you can see, the jig mounts in the workstation and it can be used at an angle, which you couldn't do before with this particular jig, and that alone opens up a whole new world of different joints you can do with this. It also has built-in work holding using these dovetail clamps, so it holds the material for you instead of you having to hold the material and the jig and drill it, which can get a little cumbersome. So I'll bring you in closer, I'll show you what's in the box, what's pre-assembled, what assembly you have to do, and how to mount this jig in the workstation. All right, guys, when you open the box, you will see an instruction book, which I will talk about in a second. Of course, the workstation itself, which is 99% assembled. The only thing I had to do was these two pieces here, which are just stops for when you place material. They had to be attached. Everything's pre-drilled and ready to go, and everything lined up perfect. The only thing was the 4 screws to mount these were missing. I just dug through my scrap screws and grabbed a couple that worked. So that was really no big deal. I did contact JessEm about it. They got back to me the next day, and they're actually shipping me 4 stainless steel screws to go in here. So they got on top of that right away to make it right, but those were missing. And then the other thing I had to put on was this little center line indicator, which lines up with the scale on the jig here. Now about this instruction book, there's a few things in here that I take issue with. They're pretty minor, but they're the sort of thing that really bug me for some reason. Let me show you what I mean. And you can see clearly this is the book for the Baltic Birch Workstation for the Pocket Mill Pro or Doweling jig. Opening the book up, it shows you what should be included. And these 4 screws right here are the ones that were missing from my kit. And it's right here, right from the beginning, where these things kind of start to annoy me. This says upper wood braces, part number 2, which they're talking about those wood pieces that are the material stops I showed you earlier and how they need to be installed. But if you come over here to the exploded view, those material stops, which are these pieces here, are number 12. And if you come down here to 12, it says material stop. Number 2 is labeled upper wood braces, but they're metal pieces. There's a top piece and a bottom piece, and they support this slot in the wood, and they're already pre-installed. It comes all together. The only thing you have to put on are these material stops and that little centerline indicator. So if you go back to step 1, what you're installing here are not the upper wood braces, it's the material stops, and they're not part number 2, they're part number 12. Now, spotting that error in the instructions and figuring out what parts actually go where is really not that difficult, but I found similar errors in almost every instruction book with nearly every tool that I've received from JessEm. For a company that makes such beautiful products like JessEm does, you would think an accurate user's manual would be pretty simple. And it doesn't end there. The very next step goes into setting up this universal mounting plate, and that involves installing some T-nuts and this clamping block and this little handle. And I started to do all that, but you only need to do that if you're using the Pocket Mill Pro. None of the rest of the instructions have anything to do with using the workstation with the Doweling jig. Nowhere in this book does it talk about mounting and using the Doweling jig. And in the exploded views, that centerline indicator I showed you earlier is not even mentioned. But luckily for me, I'm a mechanical genius and I can easily figure this stuff out. So let me bring you in close and I'll show you how to install that centerline indicator and how to adjust it so it accurately shows you the center of your dowels. All right, guys, this is actually really simple. If this wasn't already installed, all you do, turn this down. You can use this red knob here to crank that to 45. That'll give you some room to work. All these parts will be separate, obviously. So all you do from underneath here is you just put this little T-bolt through the hole. Make sure it's seated. There's a slot under there that the T-head seats into. Make sure it's fully seated and flat. You put the centerline plate on, washer, and your little knurled thumb screw nut, and you're done. Now to adjust this and make sure it's accurate, you put the plate down flat so it's back in the 90-degree position. Just loosen that up a little bit so you can move that around. You can see there's a lot of play in that. Put your jig on so it's all the way up, all the way at the 1/4 inch mark. Then you just slide this till that arrow points at the 1/4 inch. Tighten this down, and that's it. You're done. So at this point, the workstation is all set up. It's ready to go. I did want to talk about attaching material to the fence and show you a little problem that I did run into. So the workstation fence does come with these 3 nice dovetailed slots already milled into it. So I grabbed my relatively inexpensive PowerTech F-style dovetail clamp. I mostly use these with my track saw, and I went to slide it in here to hold some material down, and guess what? She don't fit. So then I grabbed my more expensive and probably slightly overpriced match fit Microjig dovetail clamp, and guess what? It's perfect. But just because these clamps don't fit in the dovetail slots, it doesn't mean I can't use them with the workstation, because I still have to attach this to my bench. I'm toying with the idea of building a stand that this will be permanently attached to, or maybe some type of attachment to the bottom where I could slide this into like a bench vise or something like that to hold it while I use it. But for now, I can just use a couple clamps and clamp it right to my bench. Now, when I built this outfeed table / workbench for my table saw, to be honest with you, I didn't really know what I was doing too much as far as workbench goes. I really just was going for some material support on the outfeed side of my table saw. But one thing I did do right is I put a little overhang around all the edges of this, and this could even be a little more, but this allows you to clamp stuff to your bench. Fixtures, jigs, that sort of stuff, and Baltic Birch Workstations. And I like using these clamps. They're pretty small and compact, so if I have a long piece of material on here, I can go out past it, and the clamp's not going to interfere with the material. Of course, if you don't have extra dovetail clamps and you just have more traditional F-style clamps like these, they work just the same. And again, they can kind of fold in towards the bench and give you clearance for your material. Okay, so we went over what's in the box with this, a few assembly things, how to set it up. I wasn't really planning on doing a lot of joints with this in this video, but it's all set up, it's attached to the bench, so let's go ahead and make some dowel joints with it. Now, like with any tool, before you use it, you need to check it to make sure it's set up for accurate results. I've had my table saw for years, but still, every time before I get started on a project, I'll check it with my little digital gauge here to make sure it's set up properly. With this tool, the majority of the time, it's either going to be at 90 degrees or 45. For what I have in mind, I'm going to need this at 90 degrees. I just loosen these 2 knobs. I push this all the way flat, and then I tighten the knobs. So I'm going to use my digital angle finder here to make sure this is at 90. All right, super easy stuff here. I just take my angle gauge and put it on the fence, zero it. So that's at 0. Then I just move it up onto my jig, and that's at 0. So now I know this is a perfect 90 degrees. And I didn't do any fine tuning or adjustment on this at all. I just literally pushed this all the way down so it was flat and tightened it up. Let's see what happens if I move it out farther, if it stays square. Let's see if I move this out to 2.5 inches. Again, we'll go on here. Well, it's already at 0, so I don't have to re-zero it. Bring it out here to where the dowels are going to be at. And again, perfectly 0. So right out of the box, no adjustment, this thing is perfectly square. Now, if that wasn't square and I did have to fine tune it, the best way is to loosen those knobs up top, and then you just use this red knob, twist it one way or the other, and you can really fine tune and dial in the angle. So to demo this workstation, I'm going to use this scrap piece of mahogany and make a little mitered frame with it. Now the trick is getting this set up the same way each time, so when you put two corners together, those dowel holes all line up. So my first thought was to line up this edge of my cut here with the edge of the dowel jig, so it's right perfectly on the edge there. Clamp that down and then drill these two holes. Then I can shift this over to this side, align it the same way, and then drill these two holes here. The problem is I'm relying on my eye to get that aligned the same every time, 8 times in a row. If this one's off a little bit and then the mating corner is off a little bit too, it's going to throw it off a lot. So I prefer to have some kind of positive stop that I can just set and then move this into and drill away and do it that way. So what I thought was taking the alignment pin, dropping it in the center there, and then I can put this up, move that into that alignment pin, clamp that down and drill it. And then when I come to this side and I do the same thing, I move it into the alignment pin, I should have the same reveal on both sides, which means all my dowel holes should line up. One more thing to consider is the farther out you go towards your corner, the less material you have to drill through. So I already kind of mocked it up and I made sure that my second hole in has enough material to drill down 1/2 inch or a little over, and there's plenty of material there, so I won't blow all the way through my piece here. So that's the method I'm going to use. First time using this thing, and I'll see how it works out. So the only thing left to do is to drill the holes and see what happens. All right, that's all the drilling done. Throw some dowels in here and moment of truth. All right, let's slap this together. It's going to be perfect first time. Here we go. Ooh. Looking good so far. Now my pencil lines aren't exactly the exact same pencil lines from corner to corner, but that shouldn't matter. Man, I'll do a close-up of this, but that looks fantastic. So there it is, guys. It looks great. That's no glue or anything right there. That's just pushed together with the dowels. You glue that up and clamp it. A little sanding, you're going to have a perfect frame. So for this joint anyways, I'd say W sled and JessEm Workstation for the win. So I hope that's a good introduction to the JessEm Baltic Birch Workstation. I think the method I used here made making these joints quick, accurate, repeatable, which is exactly what you want when you're doing joinery like this. I'll have more videos coming out doing different type of joinery on this workstation and also with the JessEm stainless steel jig. I know many of you have requested to see different joints, especially with this new stainless steel jig. I will be putting those videos out in the near future. So remember to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you get notified when those videos come out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.